She came home early. No warning. No phone call. No text. Just a wife walking through her own front door, rolling suitcase in hand, ready to surprise the man she had built 9 years of her life around. And what she found in that bedroom, in her house, in the bed she had slept in every night for 9 years, did not just break her heart. It detonated it. 4 women, her robe, her wine glasses, her bed, and a husband who didn't even look surprised to see her standing there. But here is the thing nobody talks about when they tell this story: the 4 women in that bedroom. They were not the real betrayal. The cheating was not the real betrayal. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with had been running something far darker than an affair, and the signs had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. So ask yourself this: if your spouse seemed eager, almost too eager to get you out of the house, would you notice? If documents were being signed in your name without your knowledge, would you catch it? And if the person who introduced you to the love of your life turned out to be the architect of your destruction, how long would it take you to find out? Claire Mercer found out on a Tuesday night in Columbus, Ohio. And nothing, not the 4 women, not the forged deed, not the insurance policy, not even the name behind the shell company, nothing would hit her harder than the moment she realized exactly how long it had all been planned. This is her story. The airport shuttle hissed to a stop on Birchwood Lane just after 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Claire Mercer stepped onto the sidewalk looking exactly like the woman she had spent the last 9 years becoming: composed, well-dressed, quietly successful, and completely certain that the life she had built was solid beneath her feet. She was 38 years old, a regional director for a mid-sized pharmaceutical distribution company called Vantage Health Solutions, a position she had earned through 7 years of relentless performance reviews, territory expansions, and quarterly targets hit so consistently that her name appeared in the company's annual report 2 years running. She made $134,000 a year. She drove a pearl-white Lexus RX. She owned, jointly with her husband, a 4-bedroom red-brick colonial on Birchwood Lane that had appraised at $610,000 the previous spring, a rental property in Cincinnati that generated $2,200 a month, and a joint LLC they had formed 6 years ago to hold both assets cleanly for tax purposes. She had $91,000 in a personal savings account she had been quietly building since her late 20s, money that was entirely hers, contributed entirely from her own income, because her mother, Patricia Cole, had raised her to always have something that belonged only to her. Claire was not a woman who made careless decisions. She had a measured laugh, a sharp memory, and the particular kind of patience that only people who have worked very hard for everything they own tend to develop. She was not flashy, but she was formidable, and tonight, standing on the sidewalk outside her own home with her conference lanyard still around her neck, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: uneasy. The feeling had started on the plane. Somewhere over Kansas, somewhere between her second cup of coffee and the moment she closed her laptop, a thought had surfaced that she couldn't push back down, a memory of 2 weeks prior, sitting at Tamara's kitchen table, describing how Nathan had acted when she mentioned the Denver trip. He had not merely supported her going. He had facilitated it with a kind of quiet enthusiasm that, at the time, she had read as thoughtfulness. He'd checked her flight time twice, offered to print her boarding pass, stood at the front door and watched the shuttle pull away with his hands in his pockets and an expression she had labeled in the moment as love. On the plane over Kansas, she had relabeled it. She didn't know why. She couldn't explain it to herself. She just knew the label no longer fit. Now she stood on the walkway looking at her house, and the unease that had started at 30,000 feet was pressing harder. Nathan's black Tahoe sat in the driveway, the 2022 model he'd purchased 14 months ago, partly in cash, which had surprised her at the time because they hadn't discussed a cash purchase and Nathan's salary as operations manager at Grayfield Logistics was good but not cash for a truck good. He'd told her he'd saved it up. She'd accepted that. She was thinking about it again now. Beside his Tahoe sat a silver Honda she had never seen before. At the curb, a second car she didn't recognize, and just beyond it, a third. She looked up at the house. The living room was dark, but the master bedroom light glowed warm amber behind the curtains, and through the front door drifted the low, unhurried sound of jazz, the particular playlist Nathan used when he was in what he called a good mood. The kind of mood, she now realized, she had not seen him in for the last several months whenever she was actually home. She told herself the cars belonged to colleagues. She told herself it 3 times. She found her key, she let herself in without a sound. 4 pairs of women's shoes sat near the front door. Black heels, strappy tan sandals, gold-buckled mules, a 4th pair near the bottom stair. Not men's shoes, not work boots. Women's shoes arranged with the casual familiarity of people who had removed them here before. The living room held 5 wine glasses on the coffee table she had refinished herself, one glass bearing a lipstick print on the rim. A champagne bottle leaned in a bucket of melted ice beside the couch Nathan had picked out 3 years ago. The one Claire had never particularly liked but agreed to because, she now thought, she had agreed to a great many things over the years simply because it seemed easier than the alternative. On the kitchen island sat takeout containers, used plates, and a small cardboard box from a notary courier service. Already opened, its white contents folded and partially visible. Something made her stop. Something made her look at that box for a long moment before she deliberately turned away from it. Not yet. The box would still be there. She needed to go upstairs first, and she needed to go now, while her hands were still steady. She climbed the stairs with her palm barely touching the banister. Nathan James Mercer was 41 years old, and on the surface, everything a certain kind of woman pointed to when she said he looks like someone who has his life together. He was 6 feet even, broad through the shoulders, with close-cut hair going silver at the temples in a way that read as distinguished rather than aged. He wore good watches, a habit Claire had always assumed was simply vanity. He drove a good truck. He told good stories at dinner parties. He was the kind of man who remembered the names of waitstaff and asked follow-up questions when people talked about their problems, which made most people experience him as deeply attentive, as genuinely kind. What almost no one knew, what Claire herself did not yet fully know, was that Nathan Mercer had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, in 2014 with very little, and had spent every year since then building something. Not a career, not a life, a position, carefully, methodically. The way a chess player builds toward an endgame long before the opponent realizes the board has already turned. He had grown up in Akron, the second of 3 sons of a man who lost everything in a bad real estate partnership in the late 90s. A fact Nathan had shared with Claire early in their relationship, framing it as the origin story of his financial caution, his need for security, his deep distrust of careless money management. Claire had heard that story and felt tenderness toward him. She had understood it as vulnerability, she had not understood it as a blueprint. The master bedroom door was not fully closed. She pushed it open. Nathan was in their bed, and the scene before her was so settled, so completely unhurried, that it didn't read as a secret. It read as a habit. One woman sat at Claire's vanity using Claire's nail polish, humming softly. Another was tucked under the wedding gift comforter with her eyes half closed. A third scrolled her phone at the foot of the bed with her legs crossed, barefoot, a half-empty wine glass on the nightstand beside her. And the fourth, the one propped against the headboard in Claire's monogrammed honeymoon robe, the cream-colored one from the spa boutique in Napa, the one Claire had spent 40 minutes selecting because she wanted something she would keep forever, sat with one knee drawn up, a slight smile fading as she registered the woman in the doorway. Her name, though Claire didn't know it yet, was Jessica Odom. She was 34, she was a paralegal, and she was the only one in that room besides Nathan, who fully understood what this moment meant. Nathan looked up. He did not look shocked. His jaw tightened. His eyes did the thing, that sharp, recalculating thing, and Claire understood in that instant, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that she was not looking at a man caught in a reckless mistake. She was looking at a man who had run the odds and simply lost the bet, caught, not surprised. She held the doorframe and looked at all of them, the nail polish, the comforter, the robe, and she felt something happen inside her chest that was not quite grief and not quite rage. It was closer to the sensation of a floor giving way. That single suspended second before the fall. "Everyone," she said, and her voice came out very quiet and very level. "Get out of my house." Room moved. Women gathered shoes and bags and avoided her eyes. All except Jessica, who paused at the door and looked back at Nathan with an expression that had no business being on the face of a woman who had just been found in someone else's home. It was not guilt. It was not embarrassment. It was something that looked almost like signal. A flicker of something communicated between two people who share a plan. Claire filed it away. She didn't know yet what it meant. But she would. Nathan started talking the moment the last footstep hit the stairs. The voice. The cadence. She had heard it before in smaller moments, a missed anniversary dinner, a bank statement she'd questioned briefly, that particular tone of practiced reasonableness. "Claire, just listen to me. This is not what it looked like. I can explain every single part of this, just give me a chance to." She was not listening to his words. She was looking at his phone, face up on the nightstand, unlocked. A notification banner glowed on the screen. She caught only a partial line before Nathan registered her gaze and flipped it over, but partial was enough. "Last transfer cleared. We're on schedule." She won't know until. She looked at Nathan. He looked at her. And the word "explain" died somewhere in his throat. She went downstairs without another word, walked directly to the kitchen island and picked up the cardboard box from the notary courier service. Inside was a quitclaim deed for 4417 Birchwood Lane, their home, transferring her 50% ownership interest entirely to Nathan. The signature line bearing her name had been filled in. She studied the signature for a long time. It was not her handwriting, but it was a very patient, very deliberate imitation of it. The kind of imitation that takes practice. The kind that takes time. Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway. She looked up at him and asked the only question that mattered. "Nathan." Her voice was completely steady. "What did I sign?" He said nothing. And the silence that followed was not the silence of a man searching for words. It was the silence of a man deciding which version of the lie to use next. Claire drove to Tamara Reed's house with both hands on the wheel and the document in a manila folder on the passenger seat. And she did not cry the entire way there. Not because she wasn't feeling anything, but because something had shifted inside her, somewhere between the bedroom doorway and the kitchen, from feeling into function. Her mind had gone quiet and precise the way it did before a difficult quarterly review, the way it did when the numbers on a territory report didn't add up, and she needed to find exactly where the discrepancy began. She was finding the discrepancy. Tamara answered the door in 40 seconds, took one look at Claire's face, and stepped back without saying a word. Tamara Reed was 40 years old and had been Claire's best friend since they were placed in adjacent cubicles at their first jobs out of college. Two young women in a mid-sized insurance company, eating lunch at their desks and passing notes on yellow legal pads because the office manager monitored instant messaging. Tamara had left insurance for a paralegal certification 12 years ago, had worked in 3 different law firms since, and currently handled case preparation for a civil litigation practice downtown. She was precise, thorough, and constitutionally incapable of softening information she believed a person needed to hear clearly. She was also the only person Claire knew who had expressed, once carefully, and only once, a reservation about Nathan Mercer. It had been 4 years ago, at a birthday dinner. Nothing dramatic, just Tamara watching Nathan across the table for a long moment after he told a particular story about a business deal from before he met Claire, a story about a partnership that had dissolved, money that had been tied up, a situation that had resolved itself cleanly. Just Tamara watching him, and then catching Claire's eye and giving her the smallest, most controlled version of a look that said, "I'm not sure about that." Claire had given her a microscopic shake of the head, "Not tonight," and Tamara had let it go. She had let it go for 4 years. She poured 2 glasses of water, set them on the kitchen table, and sat down. "Tell me everything," she said. "Don't edit it," Claire told her. "Everything. The shoes at the door, the glasses, the women, the robe, the specific, devastating detail of Nathan's expression, caught, not shocked. The phone notification she had only partially read. And then the document, which she slid from the manila folder and placed flat on Tamara's kitchen table. Tamara read it once quickly, then again slowly. She set it down and looked at Claire with the expression of someone who has just confirmed a suspicion they had hoped would never be confirmed. "How long has Nathan been the sole manager of your joint LLC?" she asked. Claire felt the kitchen tilt slightly. "We restructured it 2 years ago. He suggested it, said it was cleaner for taxes, fewer filing complications. I signed an amendment. You have a lawyer review the amendment." The answer was already on Claire's face. "Claire." Tamara's voice was careful. "Did he suggest the restructuring before or after he suggested you take the Denver position?" The Denver position. Regional director. A promotion that had required Claire to travel significantly more than her previous role, 3 to 5 days a month, sometimes more. A promotion Nathan had encouraged her to pursue with an enthusiasm she had attributed to pride in her career. He'd told her she deserved it. He'd told her she'd been undervalued for years. He'd said it with such conviction that she had felt in that moment deeply loved. She sat with that for a moment. "After," she said quietly. Tamara opened her laptop. The Ohio Secretary of State's business registry loaded in under 30 seconds. She typed the LLC name. She turned the screen to face Claire. The filing listed Nathan Mercer as sole member and manager. Claire's name had been removed 14 months ago, not 2 years ago when the amendment was signed, 14 months ago, which meant there had been a second filing. A filing Claire had never seen, never signed, never been told about. "He filed a second amendment without me," Claire said. "That's what it looks like. That's forgery." "That's what it looks like," Tamara said again, and her voice was steady in the way that legal professionals learn to keep their voices steady when the situation is serious. "Claire, I need you to hear me. This is not a divorce situation. This is not a cheating situation. What I'm looking at on this table and on this screen looks like a coordinated financial scheme. You need a forensic attorney, not a divorce lawyer, a forensic attorney who handles financial exploitation inside marriages. Tonight if possible. Tomorrow morning at the absolute latest." Claire looked at the LLC filing on the screen. She looked at the forged deed on the table. She thought about the phone notification she had half-read in the bedroom. The last transfer cleared, we're on schedule, and she thought about the silver Honda in the driveway and the 3 other cars at the curb and the woman in her robe who had looked back at Nathan with something that was not guilt. "Who else is involved?" she said. It wasn't a question directed at Tamara. It was the question organizing itself inside her mind, finding its own position, preparing to be answered. Tamara reached across the table and placed her hand over Claire's. "That," she said, "is exactly what we're going to find out." 3 weeks earlier, before Denver, before the burst pipe canceled the conference sessions, before the shuttle and the shoes and the robe, Claire had been standing in the same kitchen watching Tamara make coffee, and Tamara had said almost offhandedly, "You know what I've never understood about Nathan? He always seems most relaxed when you're about to leave." Claire had laughed. She wasn't laughing now. By 8 a.m. the following morning, Tamara had made 3 calls. By 10 a.m. Claire was sitting in a downtown Columbus office building on the 7th floor, across a clean glass desk from a woman named Morgan Ashby, watching Morgan uncap a black marker and turn to face a whiteboard. Morgan Ashby was 45 years old and had the particular stillness of someone who had spent 2 decades inside the worst financial betrayals that marriages could produce and had come out the other side not hardened, exactly, but efficient. She was a forensic attorney, not the kind who appeared on television panels or wrote books about toxic relationships. The kind who worked quietly, billed precisely, and had a success rate her colleagues discussed in tones usually reserved for weather patterns that could not be argued with. She had built her practice from a single case 17 years ago, a woman in Dayton whose husband of 12 years had systematically transferred $2.3 million in marital assets into a series of entities she had never heard of. Morgan had unraveled it in 90 days. She had not stopped unraveling since. Her office was spare. A desk, 2 chairs, a whiteboard, a credenza holding labeled binders so uniformly organized they looked architectural. On her desk sat a single framed photograph, not of family, not of colleagues, of a woman Morgan had never named to any client, standing outside a courthouse, smiling with the specific expression of someone who has just gotten back something that was taken from them. She listened to Claire for 45 minutes without writing a single note. Then she asked for the documents. Then she asked for 5 years of financial records, the LLC formation papers, the original deed, the insurance policy, and any emails or texts Claire had retained that referenced property, finances, or legal matters. Then she turned to the whiteboard. "I'm going to show you what I think happened," Morgan said, uncapping the marker. "And I want you to tell me where I'm wrong." She wasn't wrong about any of it. The timeline she drew began not when Claire met Nathan in 2015, but in 2012, 3 years before Claire existed in Nathan's life at all. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a woman named Dana Whitfield had married a man then operating under the name Nathan J. Mercer. Dana was a dental hygienist with a modest but clean financial profile, a condo she owned outright, a retirement account, a small inheritance from her father. The marriage lasted 18 months. Dana filed for divorce in 2013, citing financial misconduct and unauthorized asset transfers. By the time the divorce was finalized, her condo had been transferred into a jointly held entity. That entity had been dissolved, and the proceeds had moved through 2 accounts before disappearing into a third account Dana had never been told existed. Dana accepted a small settlement to make it stop. She walked away with almost nothing. "She was the first one we found," Morgan said. She wasn't the first. There had been a woman in Raleigh in 2010, a woman in Louisville in 2008. Same essential pattern each time: target a woman with clean, accessible assets, build deep trust over 12 to 18 months, restructure jointly held holdings under the guise of administrative efficiency, then create a trigger event to accelerate the timeline and exit before full legal scrutiny could land. The trigger event, Morgan explained, tapping the whiteboard, was always manufactured. In Louisville, it had been a false claim of the wife's infidelity, reversed so that the wife filed emotionally and quickly. In Raleigh, it had been a staged financial emergency that prompted a fast asset consolidation the wife consented to under pressure. And in Columbus, with Claire, the trigger event had been designed to be a discovered affair. Claire sat very still. "He arranged to be found," she said. "We believe so," Morgan said. "A wife discovers an affair, reacts emotionally, files for divorce quickly and in anger. Fast divorces receive less financial scrutiny. By the time the asset transfers surface in discovery, if they surface, the statute of limitations on certain filings has begun running. Women in my bedroom were a setup. 3 of the 4 appear to have been incidental," Morgan said carefully. "But the 4th," she turned back to the whiteboard and wrote a name, "was not." Jessica Odom, Morgan explained without inflection. Jessica Odom was a paralegal who had previously processed title transfers for a real estate services company, the same company that had couriered the quitclaim deed to Birchwood Lane. She had met Nathan through a professional connection 18 months prior. Her presence at the house that night had not been social. Claire thought about the robe. She thought about the way Jessica had paused at the bedroom door and looked back at Nathan, not with guilt, not with embarrassment, but with that flicker of something shared between people who have a plan. She had filed it away in the bedroom doorway. She was retrieving it now. "She wore my robe on purpose," Claire said. "She wanted to make sure I saw her." Morgan looked at her steadily. "We think the scene was staged to be maximally provocative, to ensure you reacted immediately and severely." "They wanted me furious," Claire said. "Furious and fast." Claire was quiet for a moment. Outside Morgan's 7th-floor window, Columbus moved through its morning, traffic, pedestrians, the unremarkable machinery of a city that had no idea what was being mapped on this whiteboard. "There's more," Morgan said. She pulled a document from the credenza. It was a beneficiary change form submitted 8 weeks ago to the insurance company holding the $800,000 joint life insurance policy Claire and Nathan had taken out in 2019. The primary beneficiary had been changed from Claire Mercer to an entity called Meridian Path Holdings LLC, registered in the state of Delaware. "Delaware LLCs don't require member disclosure," Morgan said. "We don't yet know who controls Meridian Path, but we will. And Claire, she paused just briefly, the first pause she had allowed herself in 45 minutes, when we find out who controls it, I want you to be prepared. Because in my experience, the name behind the entity is never a stranger. Claire looked at the insurance document. She thought about Ryan, her brother Ryan, who had introduced her to Nathan at a real estate networking event in 2015, who had shaken Nathan's hand and said this guy is one of the sharpest people I know, who had given a toast at their wedding that made their mother cry, who had called Claire last Wednesday from what sounded like a parking garage and asked how Denver was going, his voice carrying that particular warmth she had trusted every day of her life. She didn't say Ryan's name. Wasn't there yet, but something moved through her, quiet, cold, and purposeful, and she recognized it for what it was, not grief, not rage, readiness. "Tell me what you need from me," she said, "and tell me what we do first." Morgan capped her marker. "First," she said, "you go home, you act normal. You say nothing to Nathan, nothing to anyone in your family, nothing to any mutual friend. You give me 3 weeks." She pulled a fresh legal pad from her desk drawer. "And then we take everything." 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in June, Patricia Cole's backyard on Maplewood Drive filled up the way it always did for the annual summer gathering. Folding tables covered in checkered cloth, a cooler of sweet tea near the garden gate, the smell of charcoal from the grill, where the men always gathered as though fire were a language only they had been taught to speak. Patricia was 66 years old and had spent 40 of those years holding her family together through the particular combination of practicality and warmth that certain women develop when life gives them no option but to be the last thing standing. She had raised Claire and Ryan alone after their father left when Claire was 9, working double shifts at a hospital records department and somehow still managing to be home for dinner 4 nights out of 5. She had built this gathering from nothing, first just the 4 of them around a card table in a studio apartment, and had kept it every June without exception for 20 years, because she believed, deeply and without irony, that families who ate together in summer stayed together. She did not know what was about to happen in her backyard. Claire arrived at 1 p.m. in a yellow dress, her hair down, a dish of potato salad in her hands, and a smile on her face that had cost her 3 weeks of the most disciplined performance of her life. She hugged her mother. She accepted a glass of sweet tea. She greeted cousins and neighbors and her mother's church friend Dottie, who talked for 11 minutes about her hip replacement without pausing for air. Nathan was already there, at the grill with Ryan, laughing at something. He was wearing the navy polo Claire had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. He looked relaxed. He looked, in fact, like a man who had successfully navigated a rough patch and come out the other side, which was, Claire understood now, exactly the character he had been performing for 3 weeks. Attentive, gentle, pushing softly for couples therapy, bringing her coffee in the mornings, touching the small of her back when they stood together in public. He was, she had come to understand fully, an exceptional actor. Ryan Cole was 35, 3 years younger than Claire, and had always been the person in the family who made everything look easy. He'd started a real estate consulting practice at 28, built it to 8 employees by 32, and had the kind of social fluency that made him effortlessly likable at every gathering he attended. He told good stories. He laughed easily. He had introduced Claire to Nathan at a networking event in 2015 and had said, with the total confidence of a man sharing something valuable, "Claire, you need to meet this guy. Honestly, one of the sharpest financial minds I've come across." For 10 years, Claire had considered that introduction one of the great gifts of her life. She watched Ryan laugh at the grill and felt something move through her. Not anger, not yet, because she had been saving the anger, storing it carefully, keeping it in reserve for exactly the right moment, the way you save a resource you know you are going to need and cannot afford to spend early. Near the back fence, partially obscured by the oak tree, a man named Derek Chase, forensic accountant, hired quietly through Morgan's office, stood with a drink in his hand, appearing to check his phone. Jessica Odom was at the party. Nathan had invited her as a colleague of Ryan's, which was technically true and comprehensively dishonest, and she stood near the drink table in a sundress, making small talk with someone's aunt, performing normalcy with the practiced ease of a woman who had done this before. 2 streets away, Morgan Ashby sat in a parked car with a civil investigator named Paul Greer, who had spent 18 days building a document package currently sitting with the Franklin County District Attorney's office. Morgan had her phone in her hand and a direct line to a sheriff's deputy who had been briefed, who was ready, and who was waiting for a single text message. Claire moved through the party for 40 minutes. She ate. She laughed. She helped her mother carry out the second round of food. She did everything correctly. Then Nathan found her near the garden, away from the group, and put his hand on her back. "Going to be okay, Claire," he said, low and close, the voice he used when he wanted to project certainty. "I know it's been rough, but we're going to get through this. I really believe that." She looked up at him. She let the moment sit. "I know, Nathan," she said with perfect evenness. "I know exactly how this is going to go." He smiled, reading nothing, satisfied. She held his gaze for one more second. Then she took a slow breath, pulled out her phone, and sent a single text to Morgan. Now, what happened next took 11 minutes and rearranged everything. Morgan walked through the back gate with Paul Greer and a Franklin County Sheriff's deputy behind her, carrying a folder. The backyard went quiet the way backyards go quiet when something unmistakably official enters. That particular hush of people sensing that whatever is happening is not for them to manage. Morgan did not raise her voice. She looked at Nathan and said, clearly enough for the people nearby to hear, "Nathan Mercer, I represent Claire Mercer in a civil and criminal investigation involving deed forgery, fraudulent LLC amendment filings, unauthorized beneficiary changes, and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. You are being served with a civil complaint, and the Franklin County DA's office has been provided with the complete evidentiary package." She handed him the folder. The color left Nathan's face with remarkable speed. Ryan turned from the grill. Something crossed his face, not confusion, but the specific expression of a man calculating how bad this was and arriving at an answer worse than he expected. Jessica Odom set her drink down on the table very slowly. Morgan turned to Ryan and handed him a second document. "Mr. Cole, you are also named as a defendant in the civil action as a co-investor in Meridian Path Holdings LLC, the Delaware entity to which your brother-in-law attempted to redirect your sister's insurance policy. I'd recommend calling your attorney today." Patricia Cole stood at the edge of the patio, a dish towel in her hands, looking at her son. Ryan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Claire stood in her yellow dress in the middle of her mother's backyard, surrounded by 20 years of family gatherings and sweet tea and checkered tablecloths, and she looked at her husband and her brother, and she did not feel triumph and she did not feel collapse. She felt the floor solid and certain back under her feet. "I trusted you," she said to Nathan, quietly enough that it was almost private. "I trusted you with everything I built, everything I saved, everything I was." She paused. "I want you to know not a single dollar moved. Morgan froze the accounts 11 days ago. The deed transfer was flagged by the county recorder and held pending investigation. The insurance beneficiary change was reversed 8 days ago. The LLC has been restored to joint ownership by court order." She let that land. "You built 3 years of this, Nathan, and it is gone in 11 days. Nathan looked at the folder in his hands. He looked at Jessica. He looked at Ryan. He looked at Claire. And she saw it again, that recalculating expression, the one from the bedroom doorway. But this time there was nothing left to calculate. Every position had been covered. Every exit had been closed before the party started. Patricia Cole put down her dish towel. She walked to Claire slowly. She stood beside her daughter and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. The deputy began his process. The backyard was very quiet. And Claire Mercer, who had come home on a Tuesday night expecting a late breakfast and a sleeping husband, who had stood in her own bedroom doorway holding herself together while the floor dissolved beneath her, who had spent 3 weeks being calm and careful and absolutely lethal, stood in her mother's garden in a yellow dress and let the sun fall on her face. She had not reacted. She had planned. And now everyone at this table, Everyone who had underestimated the woman they thought they had already beaten was learning the difference. Nathan thought he had won. He had no idea that every document, every transfer, every filing, every name had been cataloged and was already sitting in a manila folder stamped with the words, Franklin County DA, financial fraud, conspiracy, forgery. He had no idea that the woman he spent 3 years trying to quietly destroy had been 10 steps ahead of him for 3 weeks. And Part 2. Part 2 is where the real devastation lands. Comment below, where are you watching this from? And make sure you are subscribed, because when Part 2 drops, you need to be there.